Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs a bill that would dissolve the special privileges given decades ago to Disney World. That means the American media company will lose its self-governing status. Racially divisive teachings in math textbooks. Many had to see it to believe it. Florida's Department of Education releases examples from rejected textbooks. One asks kids to solve an equation that purportedly measures racial bias and says conservatives have the most racial prejudice. The mask mandate in Philadelphia is now gone, just 4 days after going into effect. And Los Angeles County is taking the opposite approach, reinstating a public transit mask mandate. Honduras has extradited its former president to the United States, and he will be tried in New York on federal drug trafficking and weapons charges. A California man's great-grandmother was forced to give her property to a Nazi collector back in 1939. It's now in a Spanish museum, and her family wants it back. It's been weeks since Florida Governor Ron DeSantis first floated the idea of stripping Disney World of its self-governing status. And it seems his plan has now come to fruition. The governor today signed a bill that would dissolve the special privileges given decades ago to America's largest family media company. Here's DeSantis earlier today.
Don't worry, this is all, we have everything thought out. Don't let anyone tell you that somehow Disney's going to get a tax cut out of this. They're going to pay more taxes as a result of it. That partnership that developed early on with Walt Disney, I don't think Walt would appreciate what's going on in this company right now. I'm sorry. And so I think it's appropriate to sign that here today.
The law would eliminate the 55-year-old Reedy Creek Special District, which Disney World operates, by June 2023. That means the company will lose privileges like the ability to oversee its own infrastructure, zoning, and even policing policies. The move came after Disney declared its opposition to Florida's Parental Rights in Education bill, which prohibits educators from teaching about sexual orientation and gender identity to children under the 3rd grade. DeSantis said he doesn't feel comfortable giving special privileges to a company that promotes a woke agenda. He referred to a series of leaked Zoom meetings in which Disney executives talked about pushing for more queer characters in their content. Disney has yet to respond to the governor's latest action. And Florida's Department of Education has released examples of racially divisive math equations from a rejected textbook. The department on Monday announced 41% of math textbooks had been rejected for use in public schools, saying Florida, quote, rejects publishers' attempts to indoctrinate students. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
Racially divisive teachings in math textbooks. It seems many had to see it to believe it. After a volume of requests, the Florida Department of Education has released examples from textbooks rejected from its school system for including what it says is critical race theory type tenets. Among the examples, a textbook that claims conservatives are considerably more racially prejudiced than liberals. The screenshot shows 2 bar graphs, one showing racial prejudice based on age, and the other based on political association. The graphs are based on the Race Implicit Association test. According to a study, there is no evidence that backs up the test's validity. Another screenshot reads, "What, me, racist?" before asking students to solve an equation based on measuring racial bias. The Florida Department of Education announced Monday it had rejected 41% of the math textbooks submitted for use in its public schools. This was for including Common Core standards, social-emotional learning, and what the governor called indoctrinating concepts, such as CRT. The governor's office initially said copyright issues prevented them from sharing the examples. The Department of Education is allowing publishers to revise and resubmit the textbooks. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
2 Florida men are pleading guilty in connection with the We Build the Wall fundraising campaign. The Justice Department says they defrauded hundreds of thousands of people who donated money to the project. 39-year-old Brian Colfage and 57-year-old Andrew Badadolo each pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Colfage also pleaded guilty to tax and wire fraud charges. The first charge carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. The We Build the Wall campaign raised more than $25 million to build a wall on the southern border. The indictment says Colfage spent more than $350,000 of the donations on personal expenses, and that this contradicted his promise, which said he would not take a penny in salary or compensation. U.S. District Judge Annalisa Torres will sentence the two men in September. Mask requirements are changing in cities across the nation. Philadelphia is dropping its mask mandate just 4 days after reinstating it. And Los Angeles County is reimposing the mandate on public transit. Here's more on that story.
Philadelphia health officials on Thursday voted to end the indoor mask mandate, effective Friday morning. The city's health department said in a statement, due to decreasing hospitalizations and a leveling of case counts, the city will move to strongly recommend masks in indoor public spaces, as opposed to a mask mandate. This comes just 4 days after the city reinstated the mask mandate on Monday, April 18th. Local businesses and residents immediately filed a lawsuit challenging the mandate. Meanwhile, on the other side of the coast, Los Angeles County instated its own mask mandate on public transit and at transportation hubs, effective this Friday. Everyone aged 2 and up must comply, regardless of vaccination status. This applies to buses, trains, taxis, subways, and ride-hailing services, but not airplanes. The county's public health director says they are complying with the CDC's assessment, which says mask wearing in the indoor transportation corridor remains necessary for the public health. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
Former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez was extradited to the United States. He's been indicted on drug trafficking and firearms charges. NTD's Jason Perry has that story.
Hernandez is charged with participating in a corrupt and violent drug trafficking conspiracy to facilitate the importation of tons of cocaine into the United States from 2004 to 2022.
The former Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, denies any wrongdoing.
You know, I worked tirelessly with the purpose of recovering peace in Honduras. I gave all my effort to my country.
Honduran authorities arrested Hernandez from his home, and he was extradited to New York, where he will face federal drug trafficking and weapons charges.
That these drug cartels and these transnational criminal networks, they need corrupt government officials to operate.
Derek Maltz is the former director of the DEA Special Operations Division. He explained what Hernandez is suspected of doing.
Juan Hernandez was very, very critical in providing the infrastructure support to the Sinaloa cartel and other cartels to move the drugs throughout his country into other Central American countries, into Mexico, with ultimate distribution into America.
Maltz says the larger problem is the Mexican border and the record number of people dying from deadly drugs.
This has never happened before. The CDC's latest statistics show that we're losing 293 Americans a day, 106,854 dead in the 12-month period ending November of 2021. So the cartels are making billions of dollars. They're taking advantage of the weakness in our border security. They're taking advantage of this massive migration. And obviously, they're taking advantage of weak laws and weak leadership in America that's not standing up to this unbelievable threat to our country.
We reached out to the Department of Homeland Security, but did not hear back before airtime. Jason Perry, NTD News.
After nearly 20 years of litigation, the undisputed owner of an 1897 painting located in a Spanish museum may get another chance at getting his stolen property back. NTD's Arlene Richards has the story.
A Spanish museum controlled by the Kingdom of Spain purchased a painting in 1993 from a German baron. They didn't know it was stolen when they bought it. But David Casira claims in a lawsuit that his family purchased the painting in 1900. One of his attorneys, Stephen Zach, said the museum now knows the painting was stolen by the Nazis from Cassira's great-grandmother.
There was no dispute about where it belongs and, frankly, what law should apply.
The parties have been arguing over which law should be applied to Cassira's property rights in this case, Spanish law or California law, and also which U.S. law determines if even Spanish law can be used at all, federal law or state law. The appellate court said federal law should be used. Attorney Sam Dubbin said the appellate court got it wrong.
So the Supreme Court ruling yesterday was on an issue that has to do with what law applies to the property rights of my client. And they held that the appellate court previously applied the wrong law in deciding whether California law or Spanish law would govern whether or not the Cassiras are going to get the property back.
Now the case is going back to the appellate court, and Dubbin is hopeful they will make the right decision this time.
Someone who's holding looted property should have to give it back to the rightful owner. That's what California law would require.
The Supreme Court's decision was unanimous. Arlene Richards, NTD News, New York.
It's Earth Day, and President Biden this afternoon signed an executive order to conserve forests. He also explained his administration's plans to transition to renewable energy. Here's NTD's Melina Weiskup with a closer look at the efficiency and overall costs of these energy sources.
That achieving our ambitious climate goals is going to require nature itself to play a role.
Those were Biden's remarks just moments before signing his executive order to conserve our forests.
The president today also pledged to plant over 1 billion trees across the country as a part of his plan to reach net zero emissions by 2050. But many energy experts and climate change researchers have told me that if we are to take this net zero emissions goal seriously, nuclear energy should play a significant role in these discussions. Here's why.
Well, what's wonderful about nuclear energy is that it is a completely zero emissions generating source. And it doesn't require any backup generation, which is one of the problems with renewables like wind and solar.
President Biden has dedicated some efforts towards nuclear energy, but the vast majority of the White House's climate change agenda has been geared towards producing solar and wind energy.
Across the country, we have enough clean energy capacity to power now 56 million homes.
Wind and solar are getting by far the largest amount of federal subsidies. And while they cost more, they get less results. For example, in 2016, nuclear received $365 million in federal subsidies and produced about 1/5 or 19.6% of the nation's electricity. But solar energy received $2.2 billion to produce just 1.2% of electricity.
And again, this is a matter of public misconception. The idea is that fossil fuels get all the money and get all the support from the government, and the actual facts are completely the opposite.
In an attempt to save our nuclear power plants from closing down, President Biden this week dedicated $6 billion. As for wind and solar, the White House is urging Congress to pass a bill that will grant even more tax credits for renewable energy. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Critics say Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene should be disqualified from re-election due to her involvement on January 6th. But Greene denies doing anything wrong and says she just wants to protect election integrity. Here's Greene at a hearing in Atlanta today.
You believed that Joe Biden had lost the election to Mr. Trump, right?
Well, yes. We saw a tremendous amount of voter fraud. We have investigations going on right now in the state of Georgia. There's investigations going on in multiple states.
Greene said she had no knowledge of prior plans leading up to events on January 6th. 5 voters last month filed a challenge against Greene's qualification. Several Republican lawmakers are facing similar challenges, including Senator Ron Johnson, Congressman Paul Gosar, and Andy Biggs. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, a Republican, was captured on audio saying he would recommend that then-President Donald Trump resign if impeached. McCarthy made the remarks during the aftermath of the January 6, 2021 breach of the U.S. Capitol. McCarthy said during a recorded phone call that he was seriously thinking about asking Trump to resign. The call was said to have taken place with colleagues on January 10th, 2021. Statements from the call were originally reported in a recent article by the New York Times. A spokesman for McCarthy on Thursday responded to the report, saying that the minority leader did not say that. In the aftermath of the Capitol breach, McCarthy also allegedly suggested that Twitter should remove the accounts of some Republicans who had expressed any support for the January 6th rally. The spokesman has not responded to a request for comment on the audio. Coming up, dozens of New York City teachers have been suspended for allegedly submitting fake vaccination cards. Now the teachers' union is suing the city. And Russian and Belarusian players are banned from tennis's most exclusive Grand Slam. NTD will bring you the possible legal challenges to Wimbledon's decision. That and more coming up.
At The Nation Speaks, we don't just scratch the surface. We want to go wide and deep. Our viewers come away with a much richer understanding of the issues of the day. We really make a big effort to bring on different voices onto the show. We don't just talk to experts and newsmakers, which of course are extremely important, but we also want to hear from the American people. So the people who are impacted by the policies and issues that we're talking about, because what they have to say is just as important to the national conversation.
In New York, fake vaccination cards. Dozens of Department of Education employees have been suspended for allegedly submitting fraudulent proof of vaccination. All private and public sector employees have to be vaccinated in New York City. Today, the mayor was asked if he's thinking about lifting the mandates after hearing about the fake vaccine cards.
No, not at all. And I'm really disappointed to learn that there were fake vaccination cards. Not only is that illegal, it undermines our entire trust. And so my understanding is being investigated, and we're going to see the outcome of the investigation.
Now, New York City's teachers union is threatening the Department of Education with a lawsuit. NTD obtained a letter in which the union claims there's no proof that the vaccination cards are fake. They also say the city didn't follow due process when they suspended the teachers. In Yonkers, just north of New York City, a police officer was shot while interrupting an illegal gun trade in a bodega. The officer is scheduled to retire next week. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the details.
Detective Brian Menton was immediately brought to the hospital after getting shot in the kidney. He was in critical but stable condition. Menton served the Yonkers Police Department for almost 30 years and apparently did a lot trying to stop gun violence.
He's the best cop I've ever seen as far as the work he's done in trying to lower gun violence. I mean, it's just phenomenal work.
Menton and two others were observing 28-year-old Brian Jackson going into this bodega. You can see him in the white hoodie showing the gun to another person. Some of the group leave the bodega when they see the officers outside. Once the officers are inside, Jackson tries to leave, but Menton holds him back. That's when a shot is fired with the gun still under the hoodie, and Menton goes to the ground. An FBI agent standing in the doorframe then fires a shot and kills Jackson. Two more suspects involved in the incident are now hit with federal charges related to gun trafficking. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
Body cam footage shows two Florida sheriff's deputies rescuing a man trapped in a burning car. This report contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. NTD's Jason Perry with that story.
Two Florida sheriff's deputies arrived on the scene of a car that crashed and was on fire, and the driver was still inside.
As I get close to the vehicle, the fire was so hot that you could feel the hairs on your arms kind of starting to burn off.
The two deputies knew they had to act fast.
He had a seatbelt around his neck and his upper torso. And I realized that not only was he in the car trapped, but the whole right side of him was on fire.
So they tried to cut open his seatbelt with a pocket knife. And when that didn't work, they thought of the fire extinguisher in their vehicle.
22 Central, I need somebody here now. Get back! Come here, give me your arm! Give me your arm! Go, 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 go! Yes. Come over. Get checked out. You got chill, man. He's out.
EMS arrived and quickly assessed his injuries.
Get his leg. His right leg was in the fire. We're doing the best we can, all right? We're going to get to the hospital.
I don't consider myself a hero. I signed up for this job to serve and protect the citizens here of Charlotte County, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.
The man was transported to the hospital where he's still recovering. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Several major cities in the U.S. have casinos, but not Chicago. With the second highest debt in the nation after New York City, Chicago is rolling the dice on its first casino. However, the city's move has met with strong resistance from area communities. NTD's Arlene Richards has the story.
The city of Chicago recently announced 3 finalists for its first casino site. The proposed locations have sparked many residents' concerns about noise, traffic, crime, and gambling addiction.
The Bally's Casino Complex is simply the wrong project for this location.
Brian Israel is president of River North Residents Association. He spoke on behalf of its 23,000 member residents on Bally's proposed location.
The additional strain on infrastructure, noise, lighting, traffic, and impact on property values are unreasonable burdens to place on the surrounding community.
Tom Shear, president of an area condominium association, is concerned about increasing crime rates.
But how is the city going to be able to stop the bad guys from coming in? And adding to that, once they find out there are people with money coming into the neighborhood, going to the casino or departing the casino.
Grace Chan McKibben heads up the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community, a nonprofit organization focusing on community advocacy. She says people in Chicago's Chinatown are already suffering gambling addiction from gambling in nearby Indiana.
Everybody knows about families that have been devastated by gambling addiction, so there's concern about having easier access to casinos, and that might increase the number of people that are addicted to gambling.
Byron Sigcho Lopez is the alderman for Chicago's 25th Ward, which includes Chinatown. He says the mayor's time frame of 2 months to decide on a $1.7 billion project is extremely short.
Every time that we have rushed decisions without including the voice of the residents that we represent, we have seen issues in the long term.
However, Jenny Bennett, the city's chief financial officer, says Chicago is in dire need for a new revenue stream to help bridge the city's financial gap.
This casino project is a critical recurring revenue source to help with shoring up the city's police and fire pension funds, as well as solidify the city's financial health. The revenues generated from the casino project will allow the city to avoid raising taxes, in particular property taxes, the few viable alternatives for addressing a pension liability of this magnitude. This project is expected to create well-paying jobs, currently estimated at between 6,835 to 19,000 new construction and operational jobs for a $1.7 billion project.
The city of Chicago is trying to wrap up the bid in the next 2 months. How casino operators and city leaders will address the residents' concerns remains to be seen.
A Russian Olympic gold medalist swimmer has been banned from international competition, continuing a growing trend in sports. This comes after he participated in a rally in support of Russian President Vladimir Putin and the war in Ukraine. NTD's Dave Martin has more.
Evgeny Rylov won a pair of golds at last summer's Olympics in Tokyo. He's now banned for 9 months by the international swimming governing body, FINA. The ban is seen as largely symbolic, though, as FINA had already banned all Russian and Belarusian athletes for the rest of the year. The bans follow those of the Boston Marathon and Wimbledon, which made similar moves earlier this week, the latter of which drew criticism from top-ranked tennis player Novak Djokovic, who called it crazy. Wimbledon's decision was especially noteworthy, given that it excludes former #1 player Daniil Medvedev, among others. But what can they do? University of New Hampshire law professor Michael McCann doesn't think those players would be successful in overturning Wimbledon's decision because Wimbledon has discretion on who plays their tournament. He does think tennis's governing bodies, the ATP and WTA, which criticized their ban, could have a case, though, based on statements made in response.
They also included a statement that their relationship with Wimbledon doesn't allow for this type of ban. that participation in tournaments is based on ranking and other merit-based things. So I wonder, could that lead potentially to a breach of contract lawsuit?
He also points out the differences between banning individual players who may have varying views regarding the war in Ukraine, as well as of Vladimir Putin himself, versus banning their country teams.
It ignores that these players are human, that they're individuals, that they're not members of a national team. This isn't FIFA saying, the Russian team can't play. The Russian team is part of the Russian government. Some of these players aren't living in Russia.
The first major tennis tournament since the war started will be the French Open in May, which is set to include Russians and Belarusians as neutral athletes. Dave Martin, NTD News.
The Miami Heat has a chance to go up 3-0 against the Atlanta Hawks in the first of 3 NBA playoff games tonight. NTD's Dave Martin has more.
Atlanta's Trae Young has yet to get untracked against the Heat, hitting just 2 of 17 three-pointers as the Hawks look to make this a competition. They'll need their home crowd support in Game 3 to slow down the Heat's Jimmy Butler, who's taken control of the series. The defending champion Milwaukee Bucks will need another big performance from Giannis Antetokounmpo to get back in front of Chicago in tonight's second game. But Milwaukee will be without all-star forward Chris Middleton, who has a sprained MCL. And in the nightcap, Phoenix will look to regroup after losing star guard Devin Booker, who's out with a hamstring strain. The Suns not only lost Booker in Game 2, but their series lead as well. Booker scored 31 in the first half, but New Orleans rallied in his second half absence. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Nets swingman Ben Simmons, out with a back injury, is hopeful to play Game 4 against Boston on Monday. Dave Martin, NTD News.
Coming up, a court in California recently upheld the state's net neutrality laws. The court refused to hear arguments from service providers who now, if they want, can take their case to the U.S. Supreme Court. That and more after the break.
The performance was enchanting.
I feel better about the world. I feel uplifted. It touches you. It really does.
The expertise of the dancers was really, really strong.
To know that it was live music was really fantastic.
We didn't want to miss this.
Make sure you see it.
Have to come. Life-changing.
Coming to NJPAC, April 21st through the 24th. ShenYun.com.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, CEO of MyPillow. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried to cancel myself and MyPillow. During these times, your support has meant everything to us. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. For example, you can get my Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $39.99 a set. That's a savings of 60% and the lowest price in history. And remember, they're made with the world's best cotton, grown where the Sahara Desert, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Nile River all meet. They come with my 10-year warranty, and I guarantee they'll be the most comfortable sheets you'll ever own. So go to MyPillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen, or call the 1-800 number below to get my Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $39.99, the lowest price in history. If you do it right now, I'm also going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you, and God bless.
Communism is evil. Oh, come on. Listen, if you're as tired of the censorship as I am, I've actually got good news for you. Check out EpicTV.com. It's a brand new censorship-free video platform where you can find not only my show, but other deep documentaries, great programs, and honest movies that bring you the news without all the spin and the fake narratives. So, I'll see you there.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
A U.S. Court of Appeals decided that it would not reconsider its decision earlier this year to uphold California's net neutrality law. NTD's Jason Blair has more.
On Wednesday, a U.S. Court of Appeals rejected a petition by telecom and broad industry groups to reconsider its January decision to uphold California's net neutrality law. In 2015, the FCC adopted federal net neutrality rules, which were overturned 2 years later. In 2018, California created its own state-level laws similar to the original 2015 federal version. Proponents to the California Law Electronic Frontier Foundation describe net neutrality as the idea that internet service providers should treat all data that travels over their networks fairly without improper discrimination in favor of particular apps, sites, or services. The group argues that we don't want ISPs acting as gatekeepers, making special deals with a few companies and inhibiting new competition, innovation, and expression. Former FCC Chair Ajit Pai, who was involved in repealing the 2015 FCC neutrality laws, told PBS that he supports an open and free internet, but the federal laws were too heavy-handed and burdensome on both large and small internet service providers. He said we could disincentivize companies from wanting to build out internet access to a lot of parts of the country. After this decision, the groups could appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Jason Blair, NTD News, California.
Today is Earth Day, and many are wondering how to do their part in helping the environment. For years, the focus has been on vehicles and the individual, but after pandemic lockdowns, it's becoming more clear what areas need improvement. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more.
Roisin Kaman is an assistant professor in Earth and Environmental Sciences at Columbia University. She works to learn more about harmful global emissions.
A lot of the assumption has been that it's all traffic. And over the past few years, the media focus has been on the traffic.
During CCP virus pandemic lockdowns, Kaman says she's gained insight into the bigger picture on causes of pollution.
Vehicles have cleaned up a lot. They're not perfect. They are still a very substantial amount of pollution in large cities. But even in New York City, I was surprised at how little change we saw when all the roads were cleared.
She says prior to pandemic shutdowns, experts such as herself did not appreciate how much pollution is coming from home heating, water heaters, and power plants.
I was blaming the cars. The cars disappeared. Suddenly we had a 20% cleanup. There are so many cars here. We should have seen 80% change in all that air quality, and we did not.
In the first year of the pandemic, CO2 emissions globally dropped nearly 7%, but saw a big increase in 2021 that overcame that progress. During the initial lockdowns, she says it was very eye-opening and thinks there are certain areas we should be focusing on.
It was very interesting to walk around and think about the personal responsibility part, and then realize that that is not going to get us anywhere.
For years, vehicles and the individual have been the main focus, but the professor thinks real change is needed on a much larger scale.
Stop eating beef, there's all these things that are being pushed on us as individuals that we have to do if we want to be green. But I think COVID was a very good way of showing that you could do whatever you like, and it's not going to make a difference unless we can change the system that is providing our energy.
She says global methane levels have jumped up 17 parts per billion last year, a record increase, and scientists don't know why. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Several weeks ago, 2 pro-life activists intercepted a box of medical waste from an abortion clinic in D.C. Inside, they found the bodies of 5 late-term aborted babies. There's concern the abortions could have violated federal law. But despite repeated calls for an investigation, none have been launched. Tonight, NTD's Grace Coulter brings us a special report on the story.
It's been over 3 weeks since the bodies of 5 fully formed aborted babies were recovered from a DC abortion facility. The babies were late term and likely viable outside the womb. Pro-life activists, along with nearly 70 Republican lawmakers, have called on state and federal authorities to investigate whether the abortions violated federal law. But to date, no action has been taken. Late-term abortion is legal in DC. However, pro-life activists and medical experts have raised concerns that some of these abortions could have been performed during or after delivery, when the babies were still alive. This assessment is based on the size of the fetuses and the types of injuries on their bodies. If true, this would violate the Partial Birth Abortion Act and the Born Alive Infants Protection Act. Under the acts, killing live babies as they're being delivered and not providing life-saving care for infants born after botched abortions is illegal. Pro-life groups urge the authorities to perform autopsies on the bodies and investigate how the abortions were performed. But the DC Executive Chief of Police refused and insisted the abortions were all performed legally.
What we're seeing now is those fetuses were aborted in accordance with DC law. So we are not investigating this incident along those lines. Doesn't speak anything criminal in nature right now.
Questions are being raised about how authorities could be so confident that nothing criminal took place without an investigation. We'll now take a closer look at why there's concern federal law could have been violated. Pro-life organization Live Action spoke to several physicians who analyzed the injuries on the 5 bodies. One of the female fetuses, her image is seen blurred on screen, has her right eye open. And though most of her body is intact, there is significant damage to the top and back of her head. Neonatologist Dr. Kendra Kolb told Live Action, "This baby appears to be somewhere between 28 and 30 weeks gestational age, with evidence of deep lacerations to the posterior neck, which presumably correlates to the method of abortion used to end her life." Here's an illustration of how a partial birth abortion, also known as dilation and extraction, is performed. After dilating the woman's cervix, the live fetus is pulled through feet first, until only the head remains inside. Scissors or another sharp instrument is then used to puncture the head. The skull is then compressed so it can fit through the cervix. Compression is done by incision and suction of the brain, or by using forceps. This is the method that activists speculate could have been used to end the life of this baby. One of the other fetuses recovered from the DC clinic was fully intact and still inside its amniotic sac, raising questions about how it was killed. This fetus is estimated to be between the 2nd and 3rd trimester. Dr. Kathy Altman, a former abortionist, told Live Action, "An induction method would have been used for the abortion. Unless this baby was injected with a drug designed to kill prior to the abortion, he or she may very well have been born alive and then left to die." If the latter was the case, then this would violate the Born Alive Infants Protection Act. Adding to pro-life activists' concerns that this could be the case is an undercover video of the abortionist who operates the DC clinic, where the babies were reportedly aborted. In 2013, Live Action recorded the abortionist named Dr. Cesare Santangelo saying he would let an aborted child die if it survived outside of its mother after a failed abortion. Watch.
But would you make sure that it doesn't
there's
survive?
things you do. Let's say you went into labor, the membrane's ruptured, and you delivered before we got to the termination part of the procedure here. Then we would do things, we would not help it. Okay. Whereas if you were in a hospital in Virginia, let's say, and you went into labor and you went to the hospital and then they saw you deliver, they would do everything possible to help that fetus survive.
Okay, but you won't.
We would.
Okay.
That was the doctor talking to an undercover investigator. Now, it is possible that all of these abortions could have been performed legally, in accordance with federal law. But the point is that it isn't being investigated. I spoke with Christina Bennett, a news correspondent for Live Action. She told me that when it comes to abortion, there is a widespread lack of oversight. She says this puts both babies and women at risk.
depending on what state you're in, some states are not even reporting when there's botched abortions. Some states are not even reporting, partial birth abortions, or some states are not reporting, abortion complications. I know that I've heard many stories here in my state where women have gone to the abortion clinic and then they've left and then gone to Yale Hospital or other hospitals later on because they've had a botched abortion and they need emergency care. And there's not a lot of justice to be found for them. I'm actually going to be working with a woman shortly and recording her story because she had a botched abortion experience here that caused her to lose her fertility. And she tried to sue, but she couldn't. And she's young in her 20s. And imagine trying to sue Planned Parenthood. That is the billion-dollar, organization that has so much power. And so it's very difficult. They're not always held accountable. In fact, in my state of Connecticut, abortion clinics are inspected even less than nail salons are inspected. And even if you look at the case with Kermit Gosnell, the abortion doctor who is now in jail serving a life sentence, it wasn't until he started selling prescription drugs illegally in his clinic that he was found. And so you have to think, if they were willing to look the other way with Gosnell, how many other abortion doctors are they looking the other way with?
Across the country, there are women speaking out about abortion procedures gone wrong, malpractice at abortion facilities, and cases where they feel they were coerced by abortion providers into getting an abortion after changing their minds. But their voices often go unheard, and all too often, no action is taken against the facility. Much of the time, it's only because of the work of pro-life activists that these things get brought to the public's attention. As Christina mentioned, former abortionist and convicted murderer Kermit Gosnell got away with his crimes for years before finally being shut down and brought to trial in Pennsylvania. Gosnell was convicted in 2013 of the murders of 3 babies born alive in an induced abortion, as well as of manslaughter for the death of a woman who died during an abortion. There were dozens of similar allegations made against Gosnell, but there wasn't enough evidence to convict. A grand jury reported that state officials failed to visit or inspect Gosnell's practices for almost 2 decades. In addition, the jury stated that several government departments and hospitals were aware of malpractice and illegal procedures being carried out by Gosnell, but still nothing was done. Even when Gosnell was charged, his case received almost no national attention. It was only after Kirsten Powers blasted the media in a USA Today column for not reporting on the trial did it make national headlines. The grand jury looking into the state's oversight failures drew this conclusion. They wrote, "Bureaucratic inertia is not exactly news. We understand that. But we think this was something more. We think the reason no one acted is because the women in question were poor and of color, because the victims were infants without identities, and because the subject was the political football of abortion." Could it be that the reason the deaths of the 5 DC babies are not being investigated is because of the extremely polarizing and controversial nature of abortion? Perhaps. As it stands, the DC mayor and authorities have refused to provide answers. Ultimately, the Gosnell case prompted greater government oversight of abortion facilities in Pennsylvania. Pro-life activists are hoping that the 5 DC babies can spur the same sort of change nationwide. They say they won't stop calling for an investigation until there's justice for the 5. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
NTD reached out to Washington Surgery Clinic and the National Abortion Federation for comment from Dr. Santangelo, but we did not get a response. And coming up, Portuguese prosecutors say a man had been formally identified as a suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann 15 years ago. And U.S. state and local governments gave nearly $2 billion in subsidies to Chinese firms. This despite China being a major competitor to the U.S. That and more after the break.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What do today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. NTD Business.
new development in the case of Madeleine McCann, the young girl who went missing while on holiday with her parents in Portugal in May 2007. Portuguese prosecutors identified a German man as a formal suspect. He was initially identified as a suspect in 2020. The man has been in custody in Germany but has not been charged with murder. NTD's Joanne Robson has more on this.
The German national linked to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has been made a formal suspect by Portuguese authorities. 44-year-old Christian Bruckner was identified as a murder suspect by German prosecutors in June 2020, but he has not been charged since then. Investigators believe the convicted sex offender killed the then 3-year-old after abducting her from a holiday apartment in Praia da Luz in May of 2007. A statement was issued on Thursday by Portuguese authorities. The statement says a person was made an arguido, which translates as named suspect or formal suspect, a day earlier, but did not name Bruckner. It did, however, say that German authorities were involved in the matter. The former head of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, who worked on the investigation into the child's disappearance, told BBC Breakfast, "Well, this breakthrough could mean everything, or it could mean nothing. My own gut feeling on it, from the moment the Germans began to release information 2 years ago, was that this was the best fit." He added that he wouldn't be surprised if charges did follow. The move by Portuguese authorities could allow Bruckner, who is in prison in Germany, to be transferred to the Algarve for formal questioning. Reports suggested the move could be linked to the country's statute of limitations. The limitations generally do not allow crimes which carry a maximum prison sentence to be prosecuted more than 15 years after they were committed. This would mean Bruckner could no longer be charged in Portugal after the 3rd of May this year. Bruckner was found guilty in 2019 of the 2005 rape of a 72-year-old American woman in Praia da Luz and sentenced to 7 years in jail. A German federal court rejected an appeal against the conviction in November 2020. Bruckner has denied being involved in the disappearance of Madeleine. The Metropolitan Police continue to treat the case as a missing persons inquiry. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
America is helping Chinese companies prosper at the expense of U.S. companies. U.S. local and state governments are subsidizing Chinese companies by giving them things like low-interest loans, free land, or even cash. NTD's Don Ma brings us more.
Over the past 10 years or so, U.S. state and local governments gave nearly $2 billion in aid or subsidies to Chinese firms. Rob Atkinson, economist and president of think tank Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, explains to me why the U.S. is helping out its own competitor.
Pretty much every state government and many local governments want to attract businesses to their borders. It's when they want to grow their economy. By and large, they're indifferent to whether those are American companies or British companies or Chinese companies. And so they end up actually subsidizing Chinese companies to come to the United States.
U.S. local and state governments are subsidizing Chinese companies by giving them things like low-interest loans, free land, or even cash. But the fact that the U.S. is helping its major competitor doesn't make sense to Atkinson.
Official U.S. policy is to try to slow down China because they're playing unfairly, if you will. So here we are trying to slow down China, but at the same time, state and local governments are providing subsidies to speed up China.
Some of these companies that the U.S. is helping out are owned by Chinese state-owned companies. For example, between 2009 to 2013, subsidiaries of Chinese state-owned firm Aviation Industry Corp of China got over $168 million in subsidies. As per Atkinson, this is not a good thing.
You make the Chinese economy stronger. You make them stronger competitors to American companies. 20 years ago, the United States had about 60% of the solar panel production in the world was right here in the United States. American workers making solar panels. Today, it's down to about 5%. The Chinese have about 65% of it.
Obviously, Chinese companies putting U.S. companies out of business is a big concern. But Atkinson says there's a simple way to get local and state governments to stop helping Chinese firms.
For example, Congress could pass a law that says if you would like to continue to receive federal funds, such as for highways, you can't give money to a Chinese firm. It would stop tomorrow.
Atkinson highlighted the fact that the Chinese regime wants to be the world's top superpower. He says the more economic and technological strength China gets, the easier it is for it to achieve that goal. Don Ma, NTD News.
Coming up, a 100-year-old man in Brazil breaks the Guinness World Record. He's been working for the same company for 84 years. A luxury car show is being held in London. Multi-million-dollar classics are on display, including a sold-out Ferrari. That and more on NTD News.
According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9. The highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritang green vegetable omega-3.
What's the longest you've ever worked for the same company? A man in Brazil broke the Guinness World Record, working for the same company for 84 years. Let's take a look.
It's a regular day for 100-year-old Walter Orthman in Brazil. He wakes up in the morning, does simple exercises in bed, eats breakfast with his family, and then drives himself to work. Orthman just entered the Guinness World Record book for working the longest time in the same company, 84 years. What's his advice for those looking for a long and fulfilling professional life?
You have to like to work. I started to work with that willingness and fighting spirit. You also have to start working on something you like to do. You can't just do any job to say that you are working. That doesn't work. You're not going to be able to stand it. You have to look for a job that you like to do, and there you won't even feel the time passing. That's what happened to me. I started to work here, and I liked it. I worked my way up from point to point until I got to the position I'm in today.
According to local media, Orthman started on the factory floor of a company now known as Renault View, which produces fabrics. Soon after, he moved to administration, eventually becoming a sales manager. To keep sharp, he stretches daily and watches his diet.
You have to be healthy, so you have to take care of your health. I have been doing that for more than 60 years. I've been taking care of myself since that time. I take care of my diet. I avoid salt and sugar. I avoid things that hurt your intestines. I avoid Coke and other sodas. I only consume things that are good for you. That really helps your body to be strong forever.
Orthman and his family live in the southern Brazilian city of Brusque. He celebrated his 100th birthday on April 19th.
For 3 days, some of the most expensive cars, past and present, are on display at the iconic Royal Chelsea Hospital in London. Some are for sale for those who can afford them. NTD's Andrew Thomas has that story.
This London car show is a chance for manufacturers and dealers to sell to customers with deep pockets. One of the historical stars of the show is this 1934 Bernardo Hassan Special. It's estimated to be worth around $5.4 million. For those on a tighter budget, at least it's a chance to see the cars up close.
Salon Privé, what is it? It's a fashion show for cars. It's a beauty parade. We have the best manufacturers from around the world mixed in with a lot of luxury brands. It's an experience, so great food, great hospitality, champagne all day long. What's not to like?
There are also 3 world debuts, like the Austin Healey by Caton. It's based on the original 1954 Austin Healey, but it's been updated with modern manufacturing and made a bit bigger to accommodate modern-day, larger drivers. It costs $500,000 with a 12-month wait for delivery.
I think the Austin Healey has a beautiful form. Both the exterior design is fantastic. Back when they were making the cars in the 1950s, they had certain compromises that they had to make to the car in the way they manufactured the car. And we've been able to use modern manufacturing techniques to change that and improve it.
One of the classics that's gone electric is this Mustang. It's based on a 1967 fastback model. It keeps the iconic silhouette of the 67, but is now built in much lighter carbon fiber panels. The car will start from $450,000, and 499 of them will be produced.
People want to drive design icons. Soon it's going to be more and more difficult, but with this car, it's a zero emissions car. It's full of the latest technology.
Salon Privé launched 17 years ago. This edition runs until April 23rd. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.